Hello.
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 Morning, everybody.
And here's Deanie again.
Good morning.
Good morning. By the way, the Guardian had a really great article on marginalia and annotations, so you ought to check it out. There's two types of people: people that keep their books pristine and people who mark them up. It's a good article. I was trying to share it, but unless you have the Guardian, you probably can't read it. So,
No, the Guardian's open. You can
is
get to
it?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you do have to have a login, which is free.
Right.
But if you don't log in, you as of about a year
This is what
ago,
this
you
is my compromise. Little post-it notes and stick to the book. That way the book is still pristine, but I can write all over the post-it notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have converted my husband from being a pristine to a non-pristine person. It took 30 years.
Well, yeah, I occasionally buy used books, believe it or not. But yeah, this one is I have Ted Nelson's Geek Sparing Gifts,
All
and
right.
it's
Yeah.
just scribbled all over it and stuff. It's not my scribbles either.
Yeah.
I was given this. Look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Fight for
just
civilization. It's so Ted. Mike,
I
I'm sure was.
do wish he put an index in though. The number of times. I mean, at some point, I'll probably scan the book and make a damn index because I keep looking for no. Well, wanting to reference something, thinking, and you can sort of do it by date if you know roughly when something happened because he does put date references in.
See, that's where Notebook LM is very handy. If you
Yeah.
can get a digital copy and get that in a Notebook LM. There have been many times lately where I've been working on something and I'm like, okay, I know so and so had this quote, but I cannot remember where it was, even with an index. And I just do a search and there it is. And it tells me what page it's on and it references me back to the original document. And it's very, very much a time saver. I cannot tell you how many hours I have spent flogging through my paper bookshelves going, where the hell was that piece of information?
Yeah.
Which is one of the downside of the post-it notes thing, because once you put them in, you got to remember, okay, yeah.
Yeah, because you can look at stuff in Google Books, but invariably then shows you to a page that is not included in their preview. So it's not much use of reference.
Yeah. And then that is, I actually wrote about this a few months back and one of the frustrations with copyright and everything else. I mean, um, Kindle is such a enclosed box and other, paper books are boxes too. And so if you want to extract ideas from those, how do you do it, right? And that's really what I'm trying to, solve for. Unfortunately, the only way to really do that, because Notebook LM will just pretty much take PDFs and other kinds of docs, but whatever, it won't, you can't put a Kindle book into it, obviously, is to go to Anna's archive. But I own the book, and I've talked to friends of mine who are into copyright, and I'm like, look, this is just a digital backup of a book that I own. I'm not sharing it with anybody else. But it does raise some really complicated questions, because what if I want to share my library, my notebook full of books with someone else to allow them to search it?
Mm-hmm.
That's technically not allowed.
Well, and actually, the sort of rush to AI sort of read everything also it's having an interesting side effect. I'm working on a thing for my university and basically looking at their ref. So we do this sort of 5 yearly thing where basically they try and work out if the public research money is sort of having impact. And so I've got about a corpus of about 1,600 papers, and you'd think you'd be able to download them. No.
No.
The increasing number of tricks that the publisher's putting in there to just make things not work. And it'll end badly for everyone
Yes.
because they haven't really thought. I understand their immediate worry bead is to stop people just reading everything out. But if you can't do actual bona fide research, and it sticks in the craw that I'm getting papers that are publicly funded, most of which are open access.
Oh
But
yeah.
I've had an instance where there was a publisher wanted you to sign in to the site to read an open access paper, which must be against the rules of open access. I know why they're doing it. It's just not cool at all. And I was amazed. I've got so fast at downloading manually that I'm now getting rate limited as a bot, which is galling too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a wonderful book called Who Owns This Sentence, which I recommend that anybody who wants to see just how mad copyright law actually is and how it doesn't really work and doesn't benefit the people who it claims to benefit it's just complete. And it's like little things that somebody stuck in a document 120 years ago are still chains that we wear today in copyright. It's insane, you know.
Have you read the books? I think it's just called Piracy. It's quite interesting because it starts with copyright and goes through a number of things like penny music sheets, early radio licenses, and it's just another turn of the same screw every time.
Yeah, I know. It's not sustainable. It hasn't really been that sustainable since we went digital in many ways. And the argument I make in the blog that I just dropped a link to is that that AI makes this even worse, and it makes it even harder to realize the efficiencies which AI can give you in terms of being able to quickly go through your research library as a way of finding information. I mean, there's so many things that I'm like that when I wrote my book, I was like, there were so many things that I subsequently was like, oh, I should have put that in the book. And I'd read it before. It wasn't that I didn't know it. It was that I'd forgotten it. And that's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, so I don't know who is coming today. Fabian is not coming. He'll be seeing Dini later. He has something or other that he needed to do in this time. We do have a semi theme. Let me just look up. We're trying to be a bit more organized. So a little bit of today's theme is where do we go from here after the just presentation last week. And I have two things I'd like to present to you guys, actually. And the first one is I find it really hard to figure out what to put in the XR space because you can always put stuff and make it a mess, obviously. So there's been questions of, hang on, let me just open here. Anyone have anything else before I present this brief thing?
Oh, yours.
Are we meeting at all in July?
Yeah, it will go on. It's just that there's a different style on the website of just kind of posting a month in advance kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I'm saying is I'm going to miss July meetings because it conflicts with a class that I'm starting on the first week or second week of July. So
What class are you taking?
Teaching.
What are you
Government.
teaching? Government. Okay.
American federal government. Yes.
Oh gosh.
An
Where is
interesting
that?
subject these days.
Yeah, where are you teaching
Yes.
that? Where are you
Must be
teaching?
hard keeping up to date.
At the recently renamed Houston City College, which used to be Houston Community College. They just
It's got
renamed.
City College. Okay, cool. That's the
So
downtown. That's the downtown one.
They're all over the city, but I teach.
But which one are you at?
I'm in the I teach online mostly, so it's like it doesn't really matter where I'm at. My students are all over the place. When I'm physically on a campus, I usually teach on one of the West Side campuses, either Katy or
Okay.
Alief, because I live out on the west side of town in
Yeah.
Katy. So,
I taught high school at Alief, and I coached girls basketball at Alief.
oh, okay.
Alief
And we have
Hastings.
an Alief campus now.
Yeah. Oh
There's a
wow.
whole campus, and that's also where the West Houston Institute is, which is one of the buildings I designed. I also designed the upstairs of the Alief stuff too. So, but I hardly ever go there anymore because it's like if I don't have to drive across town for my well underpaid part-time teaching gig, I'm not going to do it. It's nice and convenient to do it from right here. I have a class in an hour, 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Well, cool
So
for you. That's great. Peter's asking, do you have a URL for photo
yeah,
building? Yeah.
let's see. I've actually got some stuff where I talk about it. It has all the floor plans and stuff. So hang on. I've rearranged my own website and I can't find anything anymore.
Right. Okay. So yeah, do a link to the building, but just to go
Yep.
through this kind of brief introduction. Dini, is it cool if I start with that now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so there's two things I would really like you guys to think about, and I'll just read the summon thing, and then I'll just summary thing. I'm saying summon because that's what it's about. So in addition to the presentation of traditional linear documents in XR, the user should be able to, based on selected text, to summon further information, either locally stored in the document or online, to be presented in specific ways. That's what I want to present to you guys, okay?
All right.
So-
Sounds great.
Thank you. So we've been looking at interactions with the hand, and I think that's really, really going to be important, but it's a known issue. And then there is what should be in the space. We've gone through many discussions on that. So I asked myself, what would I like to see in an environment beyond the central writing space? And some of the things are obvious, maybe some glossary map things, maybe some citation information, but it seems a bit weak. So for some reason, I thought about my previous tool, Liquid. Is everyone here familiar with that tool? Maybe not you, Rob.
Yes, you've talked about it before, so I think we all know what it is.
Rob, what's your face saying? I'll just explain in 30 seconds what it is then. Yeah.
Please.
Okay.
It's a tool that works on every Mac application. You select text to a keyboard shortcut, and then you get a menu of options to what to do on that text. So you can instantly search Google, translate, convert if it's a number. You can look up in Wikipedia, many, many things like that. I don't promote it anymore, but I still get really, really good reviews often. So that's nice. Point of it is, what is on the page isn't the limit of what you can do with the text. Right? The logic of it is NLS upside down, because you have 300 commands, but because of a basic hierarchy, you can summon instantly within half a second once you know how to use it. So I was wondering if when you are reading in XR, such an approach might be even more useful. So let's say you come across a piece on a part of the human brain. Select that name of that thing and use some sort of a menu system to open it up, a 3D model of that. That particular use case seems pretty useful, right?
Mhm.
The thing is, if we go into thinking about how to develop it, a lot of unknowns appear. For instance, how big should it be? Which will be really important if you then open up another model of another part of the human brain. They should fit. Similarly, if you're doing something geographical like a city or a building, they should be of the same scale. So this is where I think it becomes interesting, whether or not these things are embedded in the document or accessed online. If we have a linking structure that includes the parameters for how the thing should be shown, that might be useful. So for instance, the location in space that the author wants you to see it initially, is it in front of you or to the left or to the right? Minor thing, but also the scale becomes really important, like I mentioned. So if you summon the Tower of Pisa next to the Colosseum, even though they're not even in the same city, having them in the same scale, I know I'm repeating myself, it's just, it took me a while to get into the rhythm of this. That could be very, very useful. So then we get into the notion of what links should be. Now, Fabian, who is not here, obviously, has the notion of code snippets in XR. These things are very complementary because you can obviously, even today, have a web link that is a command.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
What's the connection between scale and, as you were mentioning, and hyperlinks? How do you get from scale to hyperlinks?
That's exactly what I was about to say. So perfect timing for the question. So today, you can have a link to a Google search for chocolate, for instance. So after google.com, it'll be something like /?, and then in quotes, chocolate, something like that. That's the key, Dini. So the notion is that the link includes parameters, just like our WebXR system. So the idea is to say, go to this repository of 3D models, and then here's a set of parameters. The first one is, I want it to be a 132 scale, or it should be 15 centimeters wide on opening. So it would have to be experimented with, but it is about putting that in the link. It is a very interesting approach to do this, and it's been done in many ways. For instance, in NLS, when you do a command in Doug's system, well, you all know that, you wouldn't just say open this file. You could also say open this file in outline view, showing first 2 lines, all of that stuff. It was really easy to enter because if you forget something, it would show you your options. So all I'm saying is that it might be cool to do 2 things. One, not only think about what's being shown initially, but provide a mechanism for summoning further stuff. One of them could be a timeline, which of course has its issues, but if the author has a timeline that maybe the author has built for all their work and just embedded in this, then it would be more reliable for the particular use at hand. So it's not just for 3D models, it's also for timelines and other kinds of data. It could also be different kinds of glossaries, like maybe the author has defined people. So other authors, you don't have to worry about, is that person, because this document says it. So it's basically about providing metadata in links. And these links, just like you can have a search link that tells Google to search for something, we should be able to put code into them. So if you click here, it will do something. It could even be a code snippet that Fabian has. So you click here and the link of the text, and suddenly all verbs will be brown, whatever it might be. But an infrastructure that allows the author to embed live stuff.
Can I ask a question? A real simple
Yeah,
question.
that was basically my pitch for thinking. So yes.
What's the point of that? What does that net me as a user? Let's imagine I'm going in as a scholar wanting to do some sort of reading and writing activity. What does that get me in the end?
The second bit or the earlier bit?
All of it.
But okay,
Is it just adding more affordances? Is it something that has real specific uses?
So starting with what exists in Liquid, which has got a few tens of thousands of users, people who get into Liquid, when they don't have it anymore, feel that their computers are really, they're missing controls because they can't easily look up a picture of something, for instance. And the key point of Liquid was that it's used in all your applications. So the software developer doesn't have to think about it. So to answer your question a bit more fully, I think that if we develop such an approach, the software must be made not only open source, because that's what we do anyway, but actively easily usable by anyone else. So if we, let's say, have a mana menu or something for these kinds of options, this kind of approach, a goal would be that anybody who's doing WebXR can just say, oh yeah, whatever, I'll just include this. So that's a really important thing, that it could be relatively universal. When it comes to the specific uses, it's hard to know exactly what a reader will want to do with your text unless you have a very specific academic paper for a very specific audience, if it's anything a little wider. So it means that unless you have AR, chances are you're not going to be walking around a lot. You'll bump into things in VR unless it's mapped. All these constraints we've talked about. So in VR, we have developed amazing systems over the last year and a half. And if we go even a little bit beyond it, I'm afraid it can get a bit messy. So that's where the notion of allowing the user, while authoring a reading, to very easily, quickly draw on further contextual information. Right? The most basic thing would be in 2D, doing a Google or Wikipedia or a Google Scholar search, invoking an AI thing if people want to do that. It's also that if you invoke a location or a space, the author has already given you a set of options so that it's not just random, right? It is basically a glossary. Hi, Jim. Does that make more sense?
Yes. It doesn't sound like something that I definitely would die not to have.
Well, I'm not sure if you can say that so easily, because if we look at the analogy of the normal liquid one, the users who use it, not everybody does. I mean, a lot of people don't do keyboard shortcuts, right? They wouldn't find any of this interesting anyway, right? Yeah, Mark, you can maybe address this.
No, well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think there's a sort of chicken egg here, in the sense that one problem with pre-populating these things is that invariably the thing you want is the one that isn't on the pre-populated list. I find with these affordances, the place I do that is I tend to build in, if I'm working on a project, maybe over 3 or 4 days, I'll build a couple of text expander prompts, which will get me into a particular thing. But I don't want them there all the time, because they get in the way and I have to learn what's there. So there's an overhead. So I can absolutely see that someone uses Liquid or something like it once they've learnt it. And this was Doug's thing, you know, this was the problem with NLS, that you had to apply quite a lot of learning to use it. Once you learned it, it was very, very powerful. But a problem that was found at the time was that it was probably more learning than most people were going to do. So I think that's sort of the challenge here. Whether it sounds appealing to sort of build code into a link, but that's probably overloading the links a bit. I mean, you can just call something, the code can be in the space. Making links all sort of complicated just gets you into a whole area of, now you have links that are like nobody else's links, and they cease to have the general sort of fungible value of, oh, that's a link. It's another caution I would raise in that. I understand what's there, but the way I would do it would just make the link handoff call something that's stored, rather than actually put a whole lot of stuff into the link. And also, although links are can be longer than they used to be, when they get to the point where, you know, if you printed the thing out, it should be several screens of stuff. Again, that's a code smell to me of structure gone awry. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to the actual interface of how you do this. For instance, the way you edit a citation and author, you click, you get a dialog box. It's not like you have to manually type these things in. I would imagine link types and the things we're talking about now would be done in a similar way. And I think also it'll be very important to do it, to look at the sequence. Let's say that, for instance, in this discussion here, Tom has uploaded into the space an architectural model of the West Houston Institute. He scales it in his room, he places it, and then he creates a link out of that, just by, you know, the relative thing of control clicking, and then he shares that to the group. So that link would go to the original source for the model. It would be sent with us saying, you know, Tom wants it here. So a lot of it would be that. But also, I agree with you, Mark. A lot of it comes down to training. Of course it does. But here's the thing. A lot of people will never want to use their data or knowledge management systems in a deep way anyway. I don't think that's who we're trying to cater for. I think we're trying to cater for academics who really care about their work. And if it's shown to have a benefit, then they would like to have more interaction. Because don't forget, we're going from a world of a mouse or a trackpad into this, right? So I think we as a research group, if we think of how to really let you use your hands, if we can build it in a relatively, I'm not sure if I like the word, but intuitive way, right? Just like, let's say this finger is the magical, here is external stuff, that kind of an approach. So.
And we have Tom and Peter, but I want to respond to that. I think it'd be not a good thing to tell scholars how to do their own research if you're not doing research yourself. So in other words, saying you're not doing complete research, or how you phrased it, without using this tool, it would not be.
Well, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. Thank you for picking up on that. I think that's really, really important. It's more like, some people who really do Photoshop and things like that, they like to learn, like gamers. A lot of people game, you have all these buttons you learn. I'm not saying everybody should do it, but I'm saying that for people who, XR is a great opportunity. I mean, look at you, Dini. You're one of the prime people, quote unquote, selling it to academia. To show, you can do this, and this happens, and be alive in it. I think it's really important what you're saying. We shouldn't give an indication that they are somehow lacking if they choose not to do it that way. We'll just show this is another way of doing it. It may be useful. So thank you, Dini.
Tom and then Peter.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, I think I agree with your idea, Frode, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But the challenge seems to be the interface to that and the setup to that. I mean, that's the preliminaries, right? If you could eliminate or reduce that, that would, I think, make it a very powerful tool. And again, I hate to bang the AI drum, but if you could get the AI to scan through all the documents in the system and say, okay, give me all the ones that have this research term in it, or these, whatever, right? And those things exist already, and it wouldn't be very hard to plug in to the system and make it a really easy user interface to where you could simply go, oh, I need to look for all these things right now, without having to have, like Mark does, ahead of time, figured out what all those things are that you could potentially have to look for in the future, which is the real problem here. Yeah.
Sorry.
Family background. I've muted a bit too late.
It's okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Very good concerns. Thank you, Tom.
Peter?
Okay, I love the idea of embedding the view spec in the URL. But I think people are going to be a little bit intimidated by the notion of constructing those. However, what we could do is have a user interface in the environment that allows the person to describe what they want to go into that view spec, then have the view spec get replaced by some short mnemonic key, and then you'd use the mnemonic key in the URL, and the system would remember what the long view spec that might otherwise run past the end of the browser window looks like. And you could build that up incrementally, and it's the notion of currying functions from functional programming, where you have a function that can take a large number of parameters. However, if you just feed it one or two of those parameters, you get back another function that takes two fewer parameters. And you're able to then build up over time what you're looking for without having to do it all in one go. To get a feel for it, take a look at the Lambda.js JavaScript library. It's exceedingly popular, and it supports automatic currying of all of the functions as a beautiful library. And that kind of functionality, again, we don't need to build it. It's already there. Just call the library and connect it somehow, wire it up to the user interface that we're building in XR. And because there's going to be a large space of possible commands, I think we should be looking at faceted search systems so that you divide the command space up into a bunch of different facets. So you select one facet, and that would basically be filtering menu items. So instead of looking at a menu with 10,000 words, you're looking at a series of category buttons initially. Select a category button, and then that would filter it and bring into view what's appropriate in that context. That's the inverse parser idea that Chris Crawford advocated in his game designs. He wasn't the first person to have the idea, but he put the most thought into using it. And the idea of an inverse parser, or a structure editor for that matter, is that you have your user interface prevent you from constructing invalid constructs in whatever language or environment you're working in. So whatever you do, by virtue of the interface letting you do it, is going to be a correct, valid command at the end of the day.
Thank you, Peter. We have Mark and then Frode.
Yeah, just very quickly, prompted by Tom's comment, I was thinking maybe the thing is to sort of, in a sense, turn this around. Rather than thinking about having to build things and things you have to learn, is think of it in terms of creating affordances. In other words, so you don't really build any interface as such, but you have the ability to call things forward. Now, so you don't get bogged down having to design things that you then don't need. Because I think one of the problems with the space you're deciding, and I don't think it's anything to do with whether it's an academic or an individual, or whether they like shortcuts or don't. I would say a thing I've observed through all sorts of working with all sorts of people, just doing informational work with them, is the one consistent thing is you normally don't know what you want until you need it. So the corollary is that most of the stuff you built you don't need. You gave it your best stab, and it turned out it's all worthwhile and it works, but just you don't need it at the time. So to get around that problem, it does seem worthwhile considering something where effectively the affordances are to a degree dynamic. And it may be, for instance, one way might be approached to use sort of, some of the newer technologies such as large language models, if the environment, the horsepower at hand and everything allows, because the massive upside of that is you just get rid of so much maintenance, the stuff you have to build and advance and test. And then if you're not using it, because you can't, it's really hard to force people to use stuff. And the thing is, for all the people who might use one thing, there'll be a vast number of people who just it's almost impossible to force them to use it. So the benefit, in a sense, the ROI in an old-fashioned sense is moot, I would say.
Thank you, Mark. Can we go to Frode?
Yeah, first, hi, Patrick. Glad you're here. I'm actually going to share a screen for a second, and that will actually bring you up to date. So what we were talking about is, amongst many things, is how to summon things while you're in XR space. Mm-hmm. So the current notion is this thing here, which is called Liquid, right? So you can use it from a hierarchical menu. And I'll get it, just did it quickly. That was too quickly. Anyway, do a keyboard shortcut, and the selected text is copied into a bar. Mm-hmm. Right. The idea here is that you can now, let's say, search for Google Images, and you get a picture of Ted, right? You can also reference Wikipedia. You can spend all day doing all kinds of things. By the way, I got a review in the New York Times, a half-page review 20 years ago by Sarah Boxer, and she said it's the worst tool ever because you could do anything with any text, so you're going to waste your time. So, she used the word "the," so that was kind of funny. But the idea is, and this is going straight at you, Mark, I think you made some very good points that are addressed like this. Because of the hierarchical nature of it, which is semi-arbitrary, no question, the difference between search and reference can be argued forever, right? But it means that the opportunity space opens up a lot. So as I said, there's over 300 commands here from the special, you can see all of these things, but you can instantly use them, right? What I did there, I selected text and I did RW, reference Wikipedia. So if I now want to look up the etymology of the word, essentially RE, there it is, right? Mm. So I'm not saying we should bring this into XR at all, but what I'm saying, we can probably do something much, much richer where personally, I do not like CD-ROMs and that era of software because it's, in a way, it's not a great term, but they are kind of information ghettos. It's all there. The internet opened up things for us, and XR opens up even more, but also in interactions. So that's why the mana menu that we have from last year, to have the beginning, or, you select something and then you have now an option. If we manage to do the interface, and absolutely, Tom, that's the whole issue. Then you should be able to have something like, if I know I do this and this and this, boom, I have that. But then Peter comes in and changes everything again. And if Peter wants to have a certain thing to issue commands, it should be possible to do that, right? And if somebody has a very specific, more old-fashioned way of doing it, so to speak, that should be possible too. I just think that we have the opportunity in dialogue and testing to define an incredibly rich command structure to do many of this. Dini?
I do want to go back and say that CD-ROMs are not all bad.
Oh no,
And I think
not all.
no, let me just finish. Coming from a time period in which I was working with CD-ROMs a lot in floppy disk, which I'm wearing my little floppy disk pen today, and going to the web, they're amazing affordances of the web, absolutely. But there's a lot of really good stuff we can say about the CD-ROM standalone computer technology. And for exhibitions and things like that, it was so important because it made it possible for an artist to know they can walk into a room, put their work into a computer, and they didn't need an internet connection. So I can tell you, nightmare that we go through with exhibiting, with exhibitions and curating with the web is so difficult, and knowing which browser to use, right? Whereas things packed together in a CD-ROM. There were some really good things. And I have to say, Rob Swigert, all the CD-ROMs that you donated to the Next, they come in handy all the time. And we're putting together like exhibitions of games, which you gave me so many of. It's so much easier with the CD-ROMs than it would be with the web. So there are advantages.
And that's another reason why I absolutely miss Macromedia Director.
Absolutely. And Patrick, we're this summer, the lab is recording 78 Macromedia Director works and with traversals. We started last week. Yeah, we're doing all of Jim Andrews stuff this week.
Oh, really? That's great.
Everything in the Next. Yes, Rob?
I have one.
Which one?
Downtime.
We're doing yours. We're doing downtime, directions. Huh? We're doing yours, 3 of yours.
Okay.
But yeah, so Patrick, 78 works this summer with the
Are
grant.
you have you done the Suzanne Treister stuff?
It's not in the Next. If it's in the Next, we're doing it.
Oh, okay.
So there's 78 works in the Next that are on Director, and on 5 of them were on CD-ROM. The rest are for the web. So we're struggling with the web ones. The CD-ROMs are easy.
Sure.
Okay, anyway, so any other comments? Questions for Frode?
I've one for Rob. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say that Frode mentioned 2 things that really intrigued me. One is summoning up the Tower of Pisa and the Colosseum in 3D and being able to manipulate it and rotate it, maybe enter into it, depending on what's available, of course. One of the few applications that I like in the Vision Pro is the airport. It's not a simulation, it's a real-time little thing that you can put on your table and rotate around, examine where the planes are coming from and so on. And I do a lot of research, and also the 3D brain. And I think that what you need to do if you're going to do that is make sure that they're in the same scale. If you put 2 together, you're going to see them in relation to each other. For my kind of research, that's wonderful. I'd love it.
It's nice to hear you say that, Rob, because thinking about this stuff, if we go back to kind of principles, like the notion of linking, we all agree that's useful. Context, we all agree that's useful. So then we get down to what does that mean? Right. So to be able to have control over how something is presented in XR, just as you repeated, thank you, Rob, I think is really, really important, because our job here is obviously to investigate new things and try out. And if we find things don't work, fine, that's research. Also to make this very, very, very open. So the notion, if we manage to get a really good interaction for this, people will just start using it. And if the technological little things that go at the back of the links are really, really obvious, like if they are JSON level simple, people may just start using that too. So you really hit the nail on the head at what I'm trying to communicate. So, and yeah, thank you. And Mark, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking more on this thing of the sort of the affordances and the things offered, that, and just watching sort of Liquid again, to a certain extent, those are very useful. But if you know where those things are, you probably have muscle memory to get there already. And I was just looking around, and I think I found about 6 things, all of which do, say, spelling and change case or something. There's some in Finder, about 3 or 4 apps, and that, which is not a negative to the concept, but saying that the easy part is, you know, I would fall off my chair if something couldn't quickly find me a picture of Ted Nelson. But the problem normally is the level below that. That you want John Doe, but not that John Doe, the other John Doe, and the affordances you don't have is the thing that gets you to the next level. So it's actually very trivial to do a web search. It's very trivial to do a translation these days. So, also, you know, certainly compared to, say, about 20 years ago. So I would sort of take the original idea and say, well, what do I do 20 years on? And it's probably where the power will go to the next step beyond just, I want to translate something, I want to look something up. What do you want to look up in what context? Did you want a royalty-free picture? Did you want a picture that might have copyright issues? All those sort of things, because that's actually the real thing you hit. Otherwise, it's very easy to get something. You can find something you can't use, or you can find the wrong thing quite quickly. But finding the right thing, it consumes the other half hour.
Absolutely. And the point of the original tool is that you can define all of these yourself. As you said, doing a web search manually, as we all do, is easy, no question. But also to add a web search to this, you can take any web accessible database and add it. Anybody can do it, because basically what you do, you search for the word liquid word, which isn't likely to be found. So that's like a dummy phrase. And when that is done, you take the URL that was returned, give it to Liquid, and Liquid knows that, okay, that phrase should go, and whatever text you have selected should go in. So to be able to deal with, you know, Peter's requirements, your requirements, and other requirements is really, really important. And all I'm trying to quote unquote sell here is the notion of providing some sort of a very, very, very flexible command structure that anybody can put on their WebXR stuff. And the problems you bring up, Mark, are absolutely part of it. Patrick, if an object-based search can be done in this way, yeah. All we're talking about is you have an executable string, either as a code snippet, or as a bit of code, or as a search with parameters that through some sort of a menu structure that should be changeable, you can do things. Mark, I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify my earlier point. So I think what would be interesting in your idea is to bring out a thing that goes one level. So yes, you can configure any search thing, but that's actually not the issue. Getting to database A versus database B. The real problem actually is if you just put the text in that you've got and you don't instantly get something back. So luckily, you know, Ted Nelson is much more famous than all the other Ted Nelsons, of whom there must be lots. So he tends to come up top of the pile. But in reality, that's not how much searches roll. So I think what would be really interesting is to see if you can build any utility at the next level. Because in a sense, most of the time, the search is not trivial that you're doing. So the
Exactly.
real value of the affordance is to actually get to the level beyond the trivial.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that is why it's so important that the user should, through various means, be able to customize this. And both by, for instance, to search ACM digital library is trivial to set that up. So you constrain your search to that. Also, we are experimenting with AA, so you can select text and Liquid and do AA, ask AI, all of that nonsense. But the whole idea is really the combination of those kinds of search, but also resources that are linked to from the document. So it says, here's a paper on the brain. these are the data stores that I use. And here are links with them with assigned sizes. Or this document includes these 3D models. So when someone issues this type of command for the basal ganglia, unless they request an external model, use the one that's included in the document. Just so all it means is that all the text can produce all these things. Because even now, unless you're a 3D modeler, if you have embedded all kinds of models, chances are they're going to be a bit different, a bit that. But I could so easily imagine someone actually enjoying, someone who's not a 3D modeler or a technical person, I'll make it a bit bigger, a bit smaller. They make it diorama. And of course, if that's open when the initial document is open, it might be too much, maybe not, right? So now you can choose to bring them in.
We're making 3D models in VR. We're using XR to do it, right? And so we have the ability to scale them. And then what we've embedded into the site is an actual ruler so that you can, it will snap to the actual size. So the beach ball is the real size. The brooch is the real size. But you can also make it larger so you can see it. But it's important for people to get a sense of scale, like how big is this thing if it's a real artifact, right?
Yeah.
Patrick, you have your hand up. Patrick.
Oh, yeah. Two things is that over here we've been using Meshy both as, making objects, from through NERF, and then also, literally going prompt to AI, which I think, interfacing into this space, I think is a really interesting, space actually. And, so, and then the other thing is just going back into my mind is that, a lot of these things tend to go back to, was it McKenna's, old VR fantasy of, objective language, accruing around you and that sort of thing. I mean, it's old and, rather quaint, but the thing is, I think it's still kind of a, a beautiful fantasy that he had.
So thank you. And also, Dini, it's a great example of what you're doing with the Next for many reasons. Two of them specifically, if something is supposed to be a physical, real thing, to have embedded in the model its actual size is really, really valuable. It's also valuable to have the characteristics of it. But I think one thing that we should make possible is make it really easy for me, if I'm looking at your beach ball, for instance, unless you have specific rights issues, to take it and use it in my document, right? No, if you give me permission, it's a rights issue, right? A lot of early web was very useful because of reuse of things. So depending on what, you should also be able to say, don't take. Of course you should, there's no question about that. But let's say that Rob has gathered this amazing series of 3D models of the brain, of some structures of the brain, as long as they were open. When we read his document, thank you, Rob, I should be able to easily take that and put it in my document. Again, provided it's open, keep the scale, keep the relationships. And another really important aspect, and Dini, with your beach ball really reminded me, the 3D models of the brain, for instance, we should embed as much information as is quote unquote reasonable. So if you want to point to something on that, you should be able to point to a specific part of that model, not just to the model itself, right? Dini.
Interesting concept about being able to download the things that we're producing for the Next, right? So we have something like 24 real items. So the thing that I think is interesting is that we're not just creating a beach ball. What we're doing is we're taking the beach ball that Holton used and we're recreating it so it is representing that object that he used in his performances so that you can see it at your house. It's not a beach ball. It's Richard Holton's beach ball for Vigursky. So it's a really specific use. So the idea of people being able to download it is interesting because that to me, that would be akin to the coming into the Next archive room, taking it out of the box and walking home with it.
Well,
So the idea of permissions is an interesting one.
yeah,
Think of
fair,
it.
fair enough. But I guess and this is a really important issue, of course. I don't think it would be like taking the physical object. I think it would be taking a digital version of it. But yeah.
And if you go back and look at what I was saying in my VR project, my VR presentation, a month ago. There's in VR, there's laws of VR, right? And one of the things that I brought up is that if something is indeed meant to represent a physical object, a physical artifact, there's a different way of viewing that artifact than it is just like a beach ball, right? Any beach ball, download, share. But this is Richard Holton's beach ball, and we're trying to make it possible for you to experience it. And so taking it and moving it on into your own space, that's an interesting problem, right? Interesting question, because it is not meant to be any beach ball. It's a real specific one. And so I don't know. I have to think about that.
It's a hugely important question, not obvious at all, but there are some things that I think are really, really important. In this community, we've been discussing timelines a ton. We've been discussing somewhat geographic information, bibliographic information. And I think this is where we can start addressing that because, for instance, the future of text has an embedded timeline. That's probably got problems and mistakes in it. We're doing our best. And it's very, very basic, but at least it is of that, right? So to provide a mechanism where you're reading something, you can see that on the timeline. And also, like we talk about the brain models will probably turn out to be wrong over time too. So that's in addition to IP. In 20 years, you might want to update your basal ganglia because they've learned something new about it. Should be entirely possible. But I think the dream of XR is very much being able to get 3D things predominantly, really interact with them, but then to get rid of them when you don't need them and then bring them back as quick as thoughts. Right? Those who have invested in Liquid, for instance, the design principle of Liquid was you should be able to execute it without burning any sugar in your brain at all. Once you know how to use it, it's so quick, you don't have to make the decision, should I look it up? We should do the same. It should be, I really believe in the hand menu. The menu is amazing. A few things, and then you have whatever you need. Wow. Yeah, thank you.
Mark.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was just thinking, but in a sense, this thing of sort of finding the models and using them, what you're really talking about is discoverability of information. It's less to do with the sort of actually the listings and stuff. Because if I want this model to go somewhere else, I've got to know that it's there. I've got to be able to get that. I've got to know that it's consistent with the environment I'm in. So there's an awful lot of infrastructure there that is, it seems to me, is the real heavy lift part of this. Otherwise, you just call something, you just get something and you get, again, the trivial level thing and it finds it doesn't fit. Or you get a shoe, but it doesn't fit your foot.
Mark, don't forget, one of them is the key where the author has explicitly said, these are the things relevant. So it's not just about pulling up from the web. That's
but it's understanding. Yes, it's getting beneath the nice hand wavy level is to say all this stuff will be there. And one of the interesting things we've been diving into is it turns out getting that stuff in there actually is just a little bit more complicated. So the easy thing is to say, well, just make it be self-describing. But there is an issue as to how much you describe.
I'm talking about the author describing it, the author themselves. There's a separate thing of just going out to find searches, yes, but the author saying, I want this item, I want that item, it should be like that. It is like curating a little photo album, but it's 3D, and then you don't have to have it visible all the time.
Yeah, but that's just metadata, surely. We have that already. So,
Mark, everything is metadata when you get to it. The notion I'm talking.
Well, it is, yes, exactly.
That doesn't, but I'm not sure if that's a useful statement because that doesn't get us closer to solving it.
Right. So the problem is that unless you have a tool that allows you to make that metadata in a meaningful form that can be used by other things, in a sense, all is for naught. That's how you get delivery of the idea.
It's not for naught. The example of Rob writes a book that has got serious chapters about the human brain. He then brings in models in the XR space as he sizes them, organizes them, places them. And then from that, there are links created that he puts in his document in an appendix, so to speak. As you read through, you come across a brain part. You can select it, do an interaction, which I think we can define. And it says, obviously it wouldn't be this literal, be like, here's Rob's 3D model of that brain part. Would you like to see it? And it appears in the space and the size and the texture and the rendering and the angle and everything that Rob wants. So it's not just about going outside. It is about allowing the author, because one thing we talked about a lot is allowing the author to really rich multimedia, three-dimensional documents. But you don't want to open up every document and have all of that every time, because it'll be too much in a lot of documents.
Okay, so that sounded like a sort of oxymoron there, because you're saying you want all this richness, but then you don't want all the richness.
You don't want it there all the time. You want to be the note. Okay, I'll stop talking. Dini,
can I interrupt for a second? We have a new person who's joined us. Peter, welcome.
Hello. Sorry, I'm always late to these things.
That's okay. We're in the middle of talking about metadata and XR and all kinds of interesting things. So I see Thomas thinking, and I see Peter clapping. Does anybody have a comment before we move on to the next part? Peter says we can also take a link server standoff markup approach to splice a 3D model of entities cited in the text. Anybody want to respond to that?
That's kind of what this is in a embedded way. I think, Peter, you would absolutely agree with that. So what we're talking about here is the issue of how can we curate as an author / editor / publisher and as a user the right kind of data for ourselves, right? So for instance, let's say we're still talking about Rob's book that has all these brain things in it, but Patrick is entirely not interested in that because he is a brain expert. So he has his own selection of these things that he has played around with. And I mean play, almost like a video game. You enjoy, you put them around, you do the things, you learn, you have fun. So when he's going through Rob's document, he has an option to both use the Rob 3D stuff, but he can also use his own, right? So the thing is, a lot of academic reading, you don't just read one document at a time. You may have several documents because you're comparing and doing all of these things. A lot of academic documents have data behind them. So at some point, yes, you may want to have one document in a Fabienne style wall. You have the entire document with everything. Of course you may. These are the kind of view specs we've been talking about. The notion I'm just talking about here is adding values to the links, whether they're internal links or external links is an important issue. But it is so we can do those magical fantasia moments of conjuring up stuff that has been curated for us.
Okay, thank you. And Peter has his hand up.
Yeah, another interesting use case would be people who are working on critical editions. In XR, you could have 4 or 5 different versions of a poem by Robert Frost up displayed in front of you, and maybe do some of those transclusion kinds of links between them like Xanadu had.
That's a really good point, Peter, because the difference between a link and a node should be reversible in most cases, right? And one thing we're talking about here is bringing link type back, right? So we're talking about, we're not talking about a simplified version for commercial release. We're talking about experimenting. Maybe when you make a link, you can do all the link type stuff that's been, gone around in cycles. We're talking about curating groups of information. Like I've used the example before, Mark Anderson is really up to date on ACM hypertext. If he is able to give a set of data on authors that he is happy with to share with us, then when I look something up and it's within that space, I may want to use his bibliography entry or whatever, right? So it would be like a linked database, but it'll be also embedded. You see, Dini, when talked bad about CD-ROMs earlier. CD-ROMs, there's a lot of great stuff about them. One of the things is that they're self-contained. You don't need the internet, just like you should have the metadata in the document. But this is just in addition to that, I'll be able to reach out as well.
Interesting that you say that, because there are works on CD-ROM that links out. So when the crossover period happened, as Mark was mentioning, that CD-ROMs didn't stop and the web started. There was this period where there was a lot of crossover. Artists took advantage of it and embedded links in their CD-ROMs, which I thought was really interesting.
It's very interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say very interesting and very important.
And Mark mentions here, as Peter says, Xanadu and transclusion.
Mhm.
Right there, he shows an image.
A problem with that, with the transclusions, is the way that I was taught academic writing when I was doing my little PhD was don't quote. Because in that discipline at Southampton, they said you should show you know the text and refer to the whole thing, which was really annoying from this sense. But I completely agree that what Mark puts up there should be an option for an academic. You should be able to do transclusions and citing, like this, absolutely. And, we're trying to reinvent everything, aren't we? In a way.
No, I hope not.
Well, we're not trying to reinvent the underlying academic discourse, of course not. But we are trying to look at all kinds of crazy ways to improve how we interact with it. So there is a lot of active stuff from our history that can now be employed. And I think the opportunity of being able to deal with a very concentrated, proper document of whatever size, whatever view, and then when you need more, it's available. It's very compelling.
Peter says here, see the latex related, I can't read that word. I don't know that word, package for current typesetting practices. He's got a link there. He also has the materials for the TEI XML format. Other comments? I'm still allergies, so excuse me. I keep clearing my throat.
Just one thought. I mean, that was really just fun. I put the thing about the transclusion thing. The thing I learned actually about using that is it's incredibly hard to write. The reason people don't use transclusion in the way that it's imagined there is you'll constantly have problems of topping and tailing. It's one of the reasons stretch text is hard to do. And people try it from time to time and they give up because actually it turns out to not really be such a clever idea, because the stretch, the notion of the stretch makes lots of sense, but when you actually come to do it in the context of written language, it generally doesn't work unless you're using essentially what boils down to a nested outline where you've just collapsed the inner parts of it.
That's really important, Mark. And funnily enough, you and Peter really helped me with mark and comment. I'm sure you remember. I'll tell you the design issue because I think it goes exactly into stretch text and all of these other things. And that is, you should be able to make a document more skimmable. I see Jim here. You should be smiling right now, right? And that can mean different things for different readers. Some readers, they need to read it, quote unquote, properly, line by line. Other, and they get distracted if they have a little extra heading and all of that. So having these types of optional skimmable things as metadata to be brought forth on use or in different views is important. Now, I've been stressing all this weekend, in a good sense, on this. And Peter, was it you who brought it up? I think it might have been you. In my testing in author, I have mark and comment. Mark means make it either a bright blue or orange or something like that. That's supposed to let you, when you're writing your own stuff, highlight whatever bit in a paragraph that is important, that isn't filler, that is for other people. So as you skim through your massive document, it's easy to see. Comment initially was grayed out text, which I felt should be there for harmony, but I think I'm wrong, because in the discussion with the two of you, you were very annoying in the good way. of making me rethink everything. So now I'm going to have a version of comment that is red, bright red. And the reason for this is the stretch text. How do you write things to go in and out, right? It's a chore. And also, how do you hide things? So the current use case is as simple as you can write in front of a paragraph, this is where I explain Ted's brilliant idea, whatever it is. You write it for yourself, you mark it as a comment because it's private. It's bright red. When you export, it's gone. But when you fold your document into an outline, it is visible. So at different levels, it is always there, but it isn't there in the academic, pristine final product. That's really important, right? The amount of design considerations to both fit what an academic expects and what can help you with a big document, if you are of this kind of visual style, is really complicated. Because you have headings, you have boldings, you have normal highlights with yellow background, and then you have the mark and comment. To get an actual flow is really hard. So I think when you talk, Mark, about hiding and revealing things, this is just another way of trying to help people do that. And finally, the notion that I brought up today is doing that, but for context. So you have the basic core document, then you have all these available things, whether it's someone's bio or a 3D model or whatever, at hand, but not always in your face. Does that make sense?
Likewise, I think transclusion was more for the main text than for the management of annotations. Thomas,
Yeah, I was just reflecting on this. It's sort of as Fred was describing some of the features, and I hope it's not. It certainly not a negative comment. What I'm drawing at is that when we're talking about things like comments, the idea, the thing is, because Xanadu was never built at scale, it never really got a proper test. And you can see the limits in using it. If you have a document that literally uses exact text pulled from something else, it's fine. For pretty much any other use, it doesn't really work, because you have to mash to make the text readable. You have to basically build around it to make it fit in the flow of things. So it wasn't really, so I don't think it was a way of sort of hiding away text. There is the interesting use, for instance, the transclusion being used in some hypertext lit, where it played with this notion of stretch text. You might press a link, and instead of actually being taken somewhere, you'd actually get some stretch text that would expand into the current node, which just shows there are lots of ways to play with this. But I don't know that it's a good model to think about in terms of managing annotations, which are and comments, which generally are side notes to the main flow of text, even if the limitation of many of our tools is that we have to write them into the text because we basically don't have the margins to write the marginalia.
That's absolutely aligned. And what I'm thinking about is quite literally something along the lines you're reading, you come across a name you don't know. You should be able to, through whatever interaction that you don't have to use your brain for because you know it, do a blah, blah, and up comes either a brief bio of that person from a trusted source, which may be a colleague, maybe even Wikipedia, whatever it is, or from your own library, or that in a wider context, like you see that in a citation tree, that known person, right? The key thing that I'm trying to really push here is you should control, when you come across a unit of knowledge, what context to bring to bear. Is it a friend's? Is it open? Is it your own? Is it a three-dimensional thing? Is it a list? Is it wordy? Whatever it is.
I find it interesting. I've been preparing for the fall semester, and Tom, you're teaching. I think some other folks, Patrick teaches more, maybe others, but it's been really an interesting phenomena. Before we had the web, teaching as I did before the browser was introduced, students would come to me and say, I don't want want to go to the library. It's too much trouble. I don't want to look anything up. It's too much trouble. And we thought, oh wow, if we package everything into a CD and all the references are there, and all to do is just look around the CD, they'll do their research, right? We'll make sure that the course pack has this information for them, but they didn't do that. When the web browser was introduced and it became easy just to start to search for things online, and the web became more richer with online content, we thought that students would sit down in their home office or wherever they're working and look up something. But I had a student come to see me who said, quote unquote, there's nothing about Martin Luther King. I can't find anything online about Martin Luther King. It's like,
Hmm.
and I kept a straight face and I said, "Oh, that's really weird. I would think that such a prominent person, there would be something about Martin Luther King. I mean, I know I've found things about Martin Luther King just by typing in Martin Luther King. And this is before Google, right? We're using
Mhm.
Alta Vista and some of the other earlier Yahoo and all of those. So I sat down with the student and I typed in Martin Luther King, and thousands of things came up. And so the fact that they wouldn't even sit down and type in Martin Luther King, now I mean, I can just go into Google, type in anything to Google, AI gives me a whole spate of information, right? But still, at the same time, it's not helping our students think. In fact, if anything, it's making it even easier for them not to think. The
Mhm.
wonderful thing about the research process is getting them to have to strategize, foment ideas, figure out where to go for that information. I mean, the library was such a great opportunity. I need to find something about Martin Luther King. Where do I start? Right? Going online. Where should I go for that? I mean, there's Google Scholar. What kind of does this count as a reference? And is that a reference even a valid one? And so much of AI, cannot be, right? So I think the interesting thing is even if we package the information, I guess is my final comment, the fact that it's just made things so much easier. It's not making them have to think about the direction of their research and what they need to do their work. All right, Tom.
Actually, Tom, do you mind if I just comment on Deanie? Because I know you're going to say
Sure,
something.
go ahead.
Okay. Deanie, I think you really put our entire research in a really important and powerful way there, because you said we should, or almost should, go back to libraries. I agree very, very strongly, right? Because we've all read the article of how AI using ChatGPT makes us understand the subject less. AI has its place, no question. So our job, I think, as researchers is to do exactly what you said, Deanie, but help the student and academic have a shape to their knowledge.
Mhm.
So it's not an abstract, go off and search a thing here, but because of the visceral nature of this, right? If you want to know about Martin Luther King, it's probably here somehow through this. We need to help them go in. So I'm so glad you said that, because no single technology will allow that. It needs to be, all the media should be allowed to be brought to bear in different ways. And Tom, thank you for your indulgence.
No, it's that's fine. No, fine. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing about AI and teaching as well as information management is that yeah, they're going to be lazy. They've been lazy since we've had Wikipedia. Drives me crazy when I have as I tell them, the analogy I use is I'm asking you to cook me a recipe. I've given you a pantry full of food, and yet you insist on going to the grocery store. And that, because I'll get links, I'm like, they'll look at the Wikipedia article on Congress rather than looking at the chapter in the textbook on Congress. And that drives me nuts because I'm like, okay, the food that's in the pantry, I've already vetted it. I know it's not poison. I know you have everything you need to do this. Why don't you use it? And so, I mean, the reality is the textbooks are horrible. They're not very good. They're not very well written. They're not really I've referred to them as a very expensive box for information. That's the other thing is they rip off the students all the time, which is why I use open source as much as I can. But the other thing is the open source stuff is digital. So now I can upload my entire textbook into, again, Notebook LM. And I've basically discovered that, you know what, I can write my papers that way. I mean, it's very simple to do that. I think the point I've been trying to make lately with the way I've been going about AI and using AI is that for the most part, we've given a bunch of 16-year-olds the keys to the car and said, go drive, without teaching them anything about driving. And this, AI is an incredibly powerful tool. And it's a question not of whether you use it, but it's a question of how you use it. They're going to use it. You can't get away from that reality. It's going to happen. And when this has come for information in general. And so to me, it's an efficiency tool. It's a knowledge expansion tool that I can use instead of avoid the problem altogether. And so what I've really been trying to teach hard in my class now is this is the proper way, or this is the way you can use AI to make your work better, not to supplant your work. I wrote a thing a few weeks ago called "Nothing In, Nothing Out." If there's nothing there to begin with, there's nothing going to come out. So, AI music has no soul because AI has no soul, right? And so I think authenticity and that sort of thing is going to make a big difference. But yeah, I mean, if we can use a way to visually represent information where we can show tendrils of information going off into a mysterious space, so to speak, where you want to encourage exploration. I mean, that's really what I'm pushing to try to develop myself and my own tool that I'm working on, but also this idea that we shouldn't be using AI for answers. We should be using it for questions. And if it's a quicker way to find our way through the information we've already got and give us the opportunity to ask new and more difficult questions, then that's an incredibly useful and powerful teaching tool, learning tool, research tool. If it's a way of, oh, well, I don't have to do any work anymore. Well, the problem there is that if the work is meaningless, people are going to go around it, and that's true of students. It's true of everybody. If it's just meaningless, busy work, people are going to look for the easiest possible way to do it. And that's why we have lawyers writing briefs with ChatGPT and turning them into judges, because it is stupid, but it's easy, right? And they don't expect they're going to get caught. And the students do the same thing to me. So, I mean, I can't get away from AI as a teacher, so I've really had to lean into, okay, let me teach you how to use it as a process helper, because my students hate writing. They're scared to death of it. I mean, that's if I ask them, I asked them at the beginning of the semester, what's the most hardest thing you do? And frankly, a lot of us, even people who write, hate writing. I like the guy who wrote The Martian, Andy Weir. He has a great quote. He says, "Give a man a book for an evening, and he'll teach a man to read. He'll amuse himself for an evening. Teach a man to write, and you'll give him crippling self-doubt for life." Which is one of my favorite writing quotes ever. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of comments in here. So Peter says they actually be called good guess. I remember we had Pete and Patrick, you might remember some of our friends from the early 2000s that were Wikipedia interventionists. Their art form was to go into Wikipedia and mess up Wikipedia pages on purpose. Remember that whole group coming out of Canada?
Well, I was part of that Wikipedia art group. That wasn't quite that early, but yeah, that's well, let's see, we lasted approximately 3 days.
Yeah. And then Mark says, interesting MIT paper recently about trying to find that AI forward research process aces the test, but yields lesson retention understanding. There was an article in the paper, I think the New York Times this past week, about employers who send out not job announcements are overwhelmed with AI resumes. They can't sort through them fast enough, even with the AI tool that they're using, because it's just so poorly done and it's so easy to knock out. Right. I had a student write me and say that he sent out 897 resumes using ChatGPT. And I said, and how many hits did you get? And he said, none. I said, I'll rest my case. Rhoda says, my colleagues seem to hate writing too. More articles, please. Okay, and then Peter says we need a Butlerian jihad to get students to actually read the material. Yeah, it's real interesting to get them to read. And what I've done, Peter, is I read out loud in class. I make them read out loud. We have read out
Mm.
loud moments, and it has been so helpful. So having students participate in a reading exercise and then responding, stopping the text and asking them questions, teaching them how to read and think again. And this is at a R1 institution. Frodo, you had your hand up.
I do. I have things. So the key thing with what I was talking about relates so much to that, Tom, because I want us all, when we write something, to basically be writing the most powerful, useful, accessible textbooks of whatever it is we're writing. That is really what it is. To write a paper, it should be the most readable, interactive, connective paper ever. It really should. And then there's something that Deanie and I talked about really briefly in our earlier meeting today that I want to mention. In a face-to-face or human voice environment like we have here, the tone that we speak, the behavior, the culture, the politeness, obviously, this is no surprise, shapes how free we feel we are to speak ourselves, right? I mean, it's basic thing. So here's the question. In a written environment, how can that also happen, right? We were talking about it in terms of articles for our forthcoming book, but can we make writing more expressive? Can we make it so you feel you're in a more of a safe space? Safe means a lot. One of them is you don't want to feel stupid. So I do agree that some of these things we were talking about earlier with commands and stuff can be very, you need to be an expert. Absolutely. If you want to be an expert, be an expert. But if you want to communicate something, what are the best ways? I mean, to get people to, my personal experience, to get people to write for the Future of Text over the last many years has been, for some people, easy, but for a lot of people, it's really hard. So can XR help these people, help you? Not all of you, and some of you write a lot. Just feel freer to shape your thoughts, present them, manipulate them, all of that. And sorry, I'm looping on myself now.
One thing we've been doing in the senior seminar class, the capstone course, is I sit down next to the design team, for example, the pod that's the design team, and I go through exercises of conceptualizing icons. Like you're going to come up with 4 icons, right? Here's the theme. Now let's look at what we can generate with that theme online. Then I take those images, move them to the side, and then we start to analyze them. Right. What's the next step? Okay, we generated 4 icons. Now, those aren't the ones we're going to use, but what is it about them that responded to the prompt in a way that made sense to us? Which ones are the shape language we want to adopt? Which ones do we think the client will resonate with the client? So it's just a step, but you have to sit down with them. I'm going to have to teach people how to do this. And I don't think that's happening in K through 12. And I don't think it's happening in colleges in a lot of places. It takes a lot of time. So,
And the faculty are not particularly well equipped to do it, to be honest. I mean, I've
no,
done
they're
a lot
angry
of
about it.
faculty development seminars on this stuff, and it's such a new universe that it's really hard, and it's not like people are underworked either.
But Tom, this reminds me of social media when that time in 2006, 2007, 2008,
Yeah.
when social media was starting to arise, and our program adopted social media, and we were teaching social media practice and ethics and stuff. And my colleagues were saying, "Oh, I'll never do that. I don't want to be friends with my students on Facebook, and oh, I'm not going to get on social media." Well, what happened was students never really learned how to communicate in social media because they weren't learning it in K through 12, and they weren't learning it in higher education. And so then it became a mess, right? And so it's just a cesspool in TikTok and different places, although I do love social media.
I was
But it's
always a little
time.
skeptical that was going to work, because the comment I made at the time when I was talking to people about that is, how many of you guys, when you were 20 years old, wanted to go to a cocktail party with your parents? And that's, Facebook is a cocktail party, and
Well, it is now, but it wasn't in the early days, right? I mean,
yeah, it was. It was a party. It was always a party.
but it wasn't your parents. Okay, I gotta go to my next
Anyway.
meeting, everybody. See ya, bye.
What you said or wrote here, Peter, about exams having to maybe be in-person vocal, which may not scale, but obviously I agree with the premise. This is one of the reasons we need to get away from writing linear documents. You need to be able to hand in something that an AI can't just do for you, right? It needs to be a connected, cohesive knowledge structure that really shows your thinking, right? That's one of the premises behind writing a glossary. Teachers now don't have time to read a student's glossary, but they should be able to, you should be able to write what you understand in different ways for that to be possible. And I think our job, part of our job, is to make it fun. You know, and fun comes from mastery. All computer games are based on mastery, right? If it's too easy to drive around quickly, yeah, see you, Patrick. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Yeah, see you next week, I hope. Okay, cool. So I don't think we should worry about skill, because I think a lot of people want to develop skills if they really feel they can express themselves. I don't know, what do you think? I mean, all of you here are experts in aspects of this beyond what the vast majority of people are.
I teach skills. I mean, the idea here is that I don't think my students are going to remember anything from my class other than maybe how to do things, how to think about things, and how to explore things. If I can get them to do that, then that's a real win. The rest of it is they're going to have to figure that out themselves. I mean, I've always said you can't teach people; they have to want to learn. You know, there's a point at which people have to listen. Same with parenting, by the way.
Yes.
If you're preaching to your kids, you're going to wasting your time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also, Mark says graph box and line often delivers. They elude, I guess you mean nuance, right? Sure.
Sorry, elide.
Elide. What does that mean?
Well, there is elision of meaning, because so it's a bit like saying, okay, well, don't write me an essay. Just send me your Obsidian set. And so this links to that, so I can draw a force-directed graph. Does that explain what you understand? Not really.
No.
You actually have to work really hard to make a graph actually have meaning. Yeah. So the one is not, they're not fungible. One does not replace the other. They both have challenges. Indeed, one of the problems with a lot of the sort of easy to get at knowledge tools is they dupe one into thinking that one is actually manufacturing understanding, and actually what you're mainly doing is farming text in boxes, which isn't what anyone meant to do, but is often where you end up. You now have two management problems, because you still have the task at hand, and you still have all the stuff that you've collected, and it's not quite clear how it fits together. I mean, writing is challenging, but one of the things, arguably, if one is encouraged into it, is, I mean, one of the, or certainly writing one's own first language, just being another problem that we don't all have the same language, it is that language is very expressive, and it allows one to catch the nuance of the point that's being made in a way that diagramming tool, so every time you see someone saying that they're going to solve all the arguments in the world by their new argumentation tool, and I just put my head in my hands and weep, because that's just not how you ever going to explain the argument or get anyone to believe it. The main thing it does for you actually is make you understand, or you understand that perhaps you don't understand your argument, because when you went to put in all the neat boxes, it doesn't fit.
In the last 2 minutes, yes, but we have a unique opportunity here, right? Some people express through song, some through painting, etc. XR will not replace any of those things, but it has an incredibly unique opportunity to extend them in different ways. And that's really what I'm talking about, to provide a space for a student to maybe put all kinds of stuff over there, spatial hypertext, we talked about that a lot. Or maybe they do a graph, but they explain how it is. And Mark, the very first discussions we had with Chris, of course, was academic arguments have to be linear to an extent, but knowledge isn't. So how do you go in and out of the connected knowledge and into the linear? These are important issues. And I think we need to, in the community, stop talking any of these things down because none of them are going to be revolutionary, but just say, let's just try. If it sounds reasonable, we just try it. Because no one here is saying, let's get rid of paper books, for instance. You know, we're not just throwing away everything. But if we really jump into it, it can be amazing. And don't forget, very, very, very few other groups are even caring about this, judging by what's being output, right? And because Fabien is the character he is, we had our 6-month review, which was, of course, a bit stressful, but also incredibly useful. And there are some things to be built. But I do think that in the deep future, our contributions will largely be based on combination of some of the things that can be done and some of the weird writings you guys can do. No, it's an open community. So yeah. So thank you guys for today. Mark, there are some practical things. Can you? Oh, Jim, did you want to say something? Oh, you're muted, Jim. Still muted.
I was simply saying thank you also.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's good. We can keep. One of the things that's really wonderful, now we have last year, which was really interesting. We can show that off, and we have what's available now. I think our group is a different thing. It's easier to be philosophical when you have a real thing that's built. So, you know, in a way, it takes a bit of stress off it, doesn't it? Because we don't have to worry about implementing, it's happening.
I will say, Frode, relative to your earlier list of things, of attributes of what's going on, the one thing you didn't explicitly say, but I assume is implied, is the idea of mutual respect. That other people have different kinds of knowledge, but if we have an open mind and a mutual respect, anything goes.
Yes, that is very important, and thanks for highlighting that. Absolutely, and that's something that needs to be continuously built upon. So cool. So I'll see you all on Monday. But Mark, for local English things, do you have a few more minutes?
Unfortunately, not. No, I've got something, and then I'm actually out.
No, that's fine. Anyway, look forward to Monday. And if you have any ideas,
have a great week.
You know what to do. Okay, bye guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.